Well, once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in the house with her mother and father and baby sister. And they lived happily there, but you know, some nights the baby sister cried and kept Mama and Dada up during the night. So that happened one night. So in the morning, when Goldilocks woke up, she yawned and stretched, jumped out of bed, splashed some water on her face, got herself dressed because she was 4 years old now and knew how to do that all by herself. And down the stairs she went, but it was quiet in the kitchen. There was nobody around. Well, she said, it's such a beautiful day. I'm just going to open the door and peek my head out. And she opened the door, and that soft summer air was right there for her. And she could hear the birds singing. And well, I'll just step outside the door and just look a little bit more around, she thought. So she did. She stepped outside the door, and she looked down, and there was an ant. That ant was crawling along on the ground. Well, there was another ant, and another, and they were making a little parade down her sidewalk. So she joined the parade and marched down the sidewalk and followed them where they went, down a little hole. Well, there was a ladybug there, and that caught her eye with its red and black shell. Good morning, ladybug, she said. And that ladybug opened up its little beetle shell, and its little wings popped out, and it flew off. Well, butterflies fly kind of crazy, so she was kind of following all over. And the reason they fly kind of crazy is because of that shell kind of in their way, so they don't have the best sense of direction. So she followed that butterfly, or that ladybug, and it landed on a flower right next to a butterfly. And she watched that butterfly open and close its wings. And then the butterfly took off, and they don't fly in a straight direction either, so she didn't know where she was going, but she followed it, and she ended up out in the middle of a meadow. And the butterfly landed on a milkweed, and right next to the milkweed was a spider's web, and it was all filled with jewels. Well, the sun was shining through it, sparkling and shining in the morning. You're so beautiful, she thought. And as she looked past the spider web, there was the forest. And there was the path, a path going right through the forest. Well, she skipped along and got to the place where it stopped from being meadow to the opening into the deep, dark woods. Chip, 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 chip. She looked down, there was a little chipmunk there, and he stood in her way. She said, little chipmunk, you have to let me by. Chip, chip, chip. They're not your woods. Those woods are for everybody to share. Now, maybe that chipmunk was trying to keep her out of the woods, or maybe he was trying to tell her she should go back home because she'd left the house and hadn't told anybody where she was going. But Goldilocks didn't think of that. The chipmunk flicked his little tail up and ran off into the woods. And just because she was talking, pretty soon she heard chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Those friendly chickadee birds came along to say good morning to her. That's what she thought. And she said good morning to all of them. And she tried to count how many there were because they like to come. They're so friendly. And next thing she knew, she heard teacher, teacher, teacher. It was the oven bird. She looked and she looked. They make their nests on the forest floor, but it was too well hidden. She couldn't find it. But then she heard, ah, ah, ah. Up in the top of a pine tree, there was a crow. Good morning, crow. And she cawed right back at him. Caw, caw. Can you caw too? And then she heard, good job. Then she heard, and she looked around. Took her a while to find it, but there was a downy woodpecker coming down a tree, looking for his breakfast too. Then she heard a growl. Oh no, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! She looked around and she heard it again. Her hand flew to her tummy. It was her stomach. She was hungry. She hadn't had breakfast. She left the house without telling anybody where she was going. She left the house without eating breakfast. And there ahead of her, she could see the cutest little cottage. It had a little thatched roof and a little round-topped red door with geraniums in the window boxes. It looked so friendly. Surely they would have something for her to eat. So she skipped down the path, went up to the door and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. Nobody answered the door. They must not hear me. My knock's probably just too small. And she tried the latch on the door, and the door opened in. Hello? Hello? Nobody answered her. But across the way, she could see a table with 3 bowls. Must be something good to eat, she thought. And she skipped on in and went up to the first big bowl, and she took a spoonful. Oh, it was just too salty and too cold. She moved that bowl of porridge, scrambled down, went up in the next chair. The middle-sized bowl of porridge. Too sweet and lumpy. She liked a little sweet, but not too sweet. So she got down and went over to the 3rd little bowl with a spoon that was just the right size and a bowl that was just the right size, and 1 bite. Whoa, let's do a 2nd bite. Pretty soon, she had scraped up everything out of that bowl and eaten the whole thing up. Maybe I'll take a little rest, she thought. And she went over to the great big chair. She threw that newspaper out of the way and crawled up and sat down, but she just couldn't quite get comfortable. That chair was just a little bit too big, a little bit too hard. She scrambled down and went over to the next chair, and she threw the knitting needles on the floor and climbed up. Oh, this chair is nice, but it's really too soft, and she just couldn't quite get comfortable. So she got down out of there and went over to the 3rd little chair. Why, it was just the right size, and she sat down in it, and it began to rock, and all of a sudden, boom! Oh my goodness, that chair broke all the pieces. Oh my, she said. You know, she'd gotten up so early and had been on such a long walk, and that porridge was warm in her belly. She was feeling a little sleepy. So she went up the stairs, and she looked around, and there was a great big bed right there. So she climbed up into it, but this bed is too hard for me, she said. She got down, she went over to the next bed. It was so pretty with a soft pink quilt. She got in that one, but she sunk down into it, so that wasn't comfortable. She went to the next bed. Why, it was just the right size. She laid down, it was just the right softness. She pulled that quilt up under her chin, and she fell fast asleep. Well, while she was sleeping, guess what? The owners of the house came back. Do you have any idea who lived there? It was Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear. In they came, they hung up their coats like good little bears. It had been a little cool that morning. And they went over to have their breakfast. "Oh, somebody's been eating my porridge," said Papa Bear. For the spoon was on the table, the porridge was spilled. Mama Bear looked at her medium-sized bowl. "Oh, somebody's been eating my porridge," she said. Baby Bear looked at his bowl. It was empty. "Somebody's been eating my porridge," he said, "and they ate it all up." "Oh my," said Papa Bear, "somebody's been sitting in my chair." How could he tell? His newspaper was on the floor. He hadn't even gotten to read it yet. Mama Bear looked at her chair. Her knitting needles and ball of yarn were all the way across the floor. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair," she said. Baby Bear looked at his chair. His lip began to quiver. "Somebody's been sitting in my chair, and they broke it all to pieces." "Oh, don't worry," said Mama Bear. "I'll fix it. And I'll make some more porridge," said Papa Bear. "But I wonder who the intruder was. Maybe they're still in the house." Well, they tiptoed, as best they could, because they were bears after all, up the stairs. Papa Bear said, "I know I made my bed today, but now it was all messed up. Somebody's been sleeping in my bed." Mama Bear looked at her bed. She knew she'd made her bed that morning. "Somebody's been sleeping in my bed," she said. Baby Bear looked at his bed and said, "Shh, somebody's been sleeping in my bed." And there she is. And with that, Goldilocks woke up. Her eyes popped open. "Oh," she said when she saw the 3 bears standing right there in front of her. I better be going," she said, and she started to run. But Mama Bear said, "Little girl, don't run, don't run. Everything is okay. Tell us who you are and how you came to be here." my name is Goldilocks. And I went for a walk, and I was hungry, and I ended up here. Oh my, said Mama Bear. We want to get you home to your mother. Do you know your whole name? Yes, it's Goldilocks. You did say that. Do you know where you live? I do. I live at 23 Woodway Drive. And do you know your phone number so we can call your mother? Oh, I do, she said, and she told them their phone number. So they called the mother up, and the mother answered the phone. Hello, hello? We have your little girl here. We'd like her to get you two to get back together again. Well, where are you, said the mother. I will be right over. And they told her their address. And Mama Bear hung up the phone and ran as fast as she could through her yard, across the meadow, into the woods, to where the home of the 3 bears was. Now, Mama wanted to yell at Goldilocks, but she was so happy to see her, she couldn't help but pick her up, lift her in her arms, and give her a great big hug and say, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you got us back together. Well, said Mama Bear, you did teach her name, her address, and her phone number so we could call you. And even if we didn't know the phone number, we would have gotten her over to where you live because she knew her street and her town. And that's so important for little children to know. So we're glad it all worked out. Well, thank you, the Bear family, for taking good care of my Goldilocks. And off they went back home. And that's the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears and how she came to leave her house and wandered off into the woods, just following the birds and the bees. And how she got reunited with her mother and father because she knew her name, her address, and her phone number. The end.